I am so glad to see you. You cannot imagine how lonely this room is talking to a camera and not to all of my friends and people that I care about. So I'm so glad that you're here. So good to see your faces today. Have you ever had a conversation and it didn't go the way you thought it was going to go? You sort of envisioned it in your mind. Maybe you talked it out and you thought, well, this is kind of the direction. And then you got into that conversation and it did not at all go the way you saw it going. And this could be for good or for bad. I mean, sometimes we think about a conversation, we're worried about a conversation, we're thinking to ourselves it's going to be a bad conversation, and so we rehearse it. You one of those psychos like me? You like rehearse your part, and then they're going to say this, and we do it in the shower, right? Because that's what showers are for. We think about, this is my part, and then they're going to say this, and then I'm going to come back with that, and then they're going to come back, and then you get into the conversation, you realize, oh no, we see it the same way. Like we're on the same page. Those are the really good ones. You lost sleep over it. You got really worked up about it, and then it's like, oh, it was no big deal. It was fine. Those are the good ones. And then there are those where you thought this person agreed with you, or even worse, like you thought you were just talking. I thought we were just talking. I didn't realize we were going to have a serious conversation. I thought we were just talking, and all of a sudden something blows up, and you're thinking like, how did we get into this conversation? We were just talking about our day, and somehow we ended up over here. Conversations, they don't always go the way you think they're going to go or the way you map them out in your head. I'm reading a book right now by Steven Pinker called When Everybody Knows What Everybody Knows. And it's about this idea of common knowledge. I won't give you the whole book report, but it deals with common knowledge, and that being that we know the same things, we accept the same things, we agree to the same ground rules, and we know that each other knows those sorts of things. He uses money as just one example. We all know that if we take a green piece of paper with a 5 on it and we give it to Publix, they will give us a gallon of milk. Like, we know it works that way, and we know Publix knows it works that way. I give you green paper, you give me stuff. We just know, everybody accepts that's the way it works. Now, in that transition, none of us are thinking, well, this piece of paper is backed by the U.S. government. Probably don't want to think about that too much. We don't think, well, this used to be backed by gold, but it's no longer backed by gold, and we have this whole fiduciary system. You don't think any of that. You think, I give you paper, you give me stuff. I swipe my card, you give me stuff. I know that. Publix knows that. I know that Publix knows that. And so everything works. Where it begins to break down is when we don't all know and or agree on the same things. When I think you might know what I know, but I'm not sure you know. Here's how it plays out in our world. When I'm not sure where you stand on a certain issue, like we don't share common, I don't know that you know that I know that you know, and what we'll do is we'll kind of tiptoe in. You've been in those conversations. Like, I don't want to go straight into this. I'm just going to kind of throw something out over here and get their response. And then that'll help me know where they are and whether I want to continue this conversation or not. We exist in that world a lot. Not sure what they know. Not sure what they think. Not sure if we agree. I'm just going to kind of stay around the edges. We're starting this book, the book of Habakkuk. And the problem with common knowledge as it relates to Habakkuk is you and I don't know, and we can't know everything God knows. We know a lot about God. We know a lot of the way God tends to respond. We know a lot about God's character. We don't know everything about God. We don't see from his perspective. We have a very limited window of time, our lifetime, our experiences. We can study history, but we weren't there. We don't know what's coming in the future. We have this little bit of perspective. God sees all things from beginning to end. Future, past, future, history, past, eternity, future. God sees all of that, one connected theme. You and I don't. We get this little window. We don't have God's perspective. And so sometimes we're working our way through this world and there are things that we don't get. Like, I don't get it. And in those times, it's helpful to remember we don't see everything from God's perspective. As Ian mentioned, we're jumping into Habakkuk. If you have your Bible, I could tell you where Habakkuk is and it will do you no good. Right? It will do you no. Like if I tell you it's between Nahum and Zephaniah, does that help anybody? Maybe two of us. But it doesn't help for me to tell you how to find. Just use the table of contents. That's why God wrote them. All right, that's why God wrote the table of contents. You got a little while before I start reading it, so kind of find where Habakkuk is. This is a great series for you to bring your Bible and kind of read along with us because we're going straight through this book together. In this book, Habakkuk is having a conversation with God. That's the whole book. He is a prophet, and normally prophets speak to the people. They warn the people, they confront the people. Habakkuk is a different book from a prophet in that it is Habakkuk saying things to God and God saying things back to him. It's a conversation, 3 chapters. It's a conversation, a back and forth between Habakkuk and God. Now, what we don't know is we don't know how Habakkuk expected God to answer. We don't know that. We don't know how Habakkuk thought God was going to respond. Here's what we know. God did not respond the way Habakkuk thought. It is very clear in this story, Habakkuk got from God what he is not expecting. There's a real common knowledge breakdown in this book. And it is revealed, like Habakkuk, you don't know the mind of God. You don't understand the mind of God. You got to figure out what to do when you don't understand what God is up to. Now, I want to say, and a lot of today is introductory, but the book of Habakkuk, it gives us a perspective on God, a true perspective on God, an accurate perspective on God. It does not give us the only perspective on God, right? This is a slice of who God is. We like to simplify things. We like shortcuts and categories and labels, and that's true for the way we look at God as well. We want God to be this. God is this, and only that. We only want to talk about that. We only want to think about that. Problem is, when you read the Bible, you realize God is way bigger than any one thing. And there are aspects of God's character that are easy for me to identify with and understand. And there are other aspects of God's character that I have to sit with for a little while. This is going to be one of those. But part of the reason we're studying it is so that we get kind of a different lens on God. This is why we study different parts of the Bible at our church. So that, okay, let's see this aspect of God. Let's understand this characteristic of God. And let's see how God responded in this particular situation. We get that with Habakkuk. The way God responds in Habakkuk is not the way he always responds. Right? To be fair, it's not the way he always responds. It is the way he responded here. And it is similar to the way he sometimes responds. So I want us to keep that clear, that this is a look at God, a perspective on God. A couple things about Habakkuk. This is the only time in the Bible we meet Habakkuk. There's not somewhere else to go and get more biographical information. Everything we know about Habakkuk is in this particular book. Habakkuk's a prophet. We know that. Habakkuk is also a musician. He's one of worship leaders at the temple, and so he writes prayers, he writes songs, he leads in singing. Here's the problem for us when we get to the book of Habakkuk. Habakkuk is all out of happy songs when we get to Habakkuk. If you needed a happy song to get February going, Habakkuk's all out of happy songs. Okay, he comes with a pretty heated song right out the gate, a pretty heated response right out the gate. No time for happiness. Now, we created a timeline, and I know some of you are way into this, and some of you ain't even into this, but I want to try to set Habakkuk in context of the Old Testament. If at any point you get lost in the next 3 minutes, just forget about it. Just don't worry about it. All right, you will be fine. But I want to get us in the right time space, which our lights provide just a little bit of a obstacle, but we'll make it work. I started in 930 with Solomon. Most of us know Solomon. King David was his father, so David is before Solomon. David has Solomon, he becomes king. When Solomon dies, they can't pick a king. They can't agree on a king, and so the nation of Israel divides into two kingdoms, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, which is the period of the kings that's going to run all along here. By the way, in our daily Bible reading, not this week, but next week, we're going to read 2 Kings. It's this history. It's this history that we're all going to read about. During this period of the kings, we've got Elijah, some of you know that name, Elisha, Jonah, Isaiah. They're doing their thing right in here if you're familiar with any of those. When the kingdoms divide, sometimes they choose good kings, sometimes they choose bad kings. The longer they exist, the worse kings they select. As a matter of fact, 2 Kings is going to be full of, and this king did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Like, we're going to get a lot of that in 2 Kings, especially for the northern kingdom. A lot of bad kings, a lot of disobedience, a lot of idol worship, until in 722 the Assyrians conquer the northern half of the kingdom. They're gone. They're done away with. The southern kingdom continues, and in the mid to early 600s, we've got Ezekiel going, Jeremiah. This is where Habakkuk fits in. Daniel's doing his thing. Now, Daniel's already been taken away into captivity in Babylon, which, by the way, by the time we get here, the Assyrians have been attacked by the Babylonians, and the Babylonians are now in charge. Sometimes called the Chaldeans, which seems like a trivial thing, but your Bible in Habakkuk may reference the Chaldeans. Chaldeans and Babylonians, same, for this purpose, same. So Daniel's doing his thing, Zephaniah is doing his thing, and I throw him in only because at the end of this week we're going to read Zephaniah as well. It's a short prophet book too. We're going to read that in the daily Bible reading. The disobedience in the southern kingdom ramps up. Evil king, evil king, evil king, disobedience, idolatry, mistreatment of the poor, mistreatment of the foreigner, mistreatment of the orphan. All of that sort of thing is happening until in 586 the southern kingdom is conquered by Babylon. They go into captivity, and then about 536 they begin to come back. And so this is when we have Nehemiah and we have Esther, we have Ezra. Those folks are returning way over 430. Malachi, last book of the Old Testament. Malachi is being a prophet for about 30 years. So we get to around 400 BC. And then there's 400 years when God doesn't speak. This is the end of the Old Testament. 400 years later, around 3 or 4 BC, Jesus is born and the New Testament starts. All right, so that side, David, Moses, Abraham, all those characters are that way. This is the period of the kings. Both kingdoms fall. The southern kingdom eventually comes back, and the exiles return. Now, one more comment about Habakkuk. We like our heroes to be heroes. Again, back to the categories and labels. We like people to be all good, all bad. We have heroes and we have villains. And we like our heroes to always be good and right, and we like our villains to always be wrong and corrupt. The problem is that's not the way the world works. If we're objective, if we're reasonable, there are people who do more good than bad, and there are people who do more bad than good. But hardly anyone is all bad or all good. We like the people on our side to always be right, to always, in our opinion, be good. Pick a side, whatever side you're on. Christian, like Christian, if you consider yourself evangelical, if you consider yourself conservative, if you consider yourself liberal, if you consider yourself Republican, if you consider yourself Democrat, whatever side you say, this is me, the way our world tends to respond is, if you're on my side, then you're always going to be right. I'm always going to defend whatever you do. You're always right. And if you're on the other side, you're always wrong. Doesn't matter what you do, you are always wrong. We have these false dichotomies in our world and in our culture, and we will defend our side no matter what. And if, by chance, someone on our side does something a little wrong, we have all kind of justifications for that. Primarily, yes, but the other side did really, really wrong. Like they are way worse than we are. We're not so bad. We like very clear cut. All good over here, all bad over there. Habakkuk is not that. Humans are not that. And so as we study this character, we're going to admit these are times he really gets it right. And these are times that we need to be different from him. If you found Habakkuk, my goodness, I could not have given you more time. Wow. So you are slow if you're not there yet. Here we go. It will be on the screen as always. Habakkuk chapter 1, the prophecy that Habakkuk the prophet received. This is the conversation. We won't stop after every verse, but the word translated prophecy in this first verse, it carries with it the sense of burden, weight. He's not just getting a word from the Lord. Like he's not just having a vision from God. This comes with a burden to it. This is complex. Habakkuk, what you're about to get downloaded, it's going to be hard. Sometimes the word is used to talk about the pack that you would put on an animal that's carrying it, that weight, that burden. And so I want to say at the beginning, this is a heavy book. It is a weight of a book. It is going to ask us to evaluate some things that we don't want to evaluate. It is going to ask us to look in the mirror and ask some really hard questions. Now, verse 2, we hear Habakkuk's voice for the first time. Again, he's going to say something to God, and God is going to respond, and then Habakkuk is going to say something to God, and God is going to respond, and then Habakkuk's going to say something at the end. That's sort of that big outline of this book. But before we go further, just Habakkuk is speaking for the remnant. Habakkuk is speaking on behalf of what we would call the remnant. Can we just be thankful for the remnant? This is a theme throughout the Bible, that whenever, usually a majority of God's people turns against him, whenever a majority of God's people run after false gods, or they participate in cruelty, or like we said, they turn their back on the poor, they turn their back on the foreigner, they turn their back on the widow, they turn their back on the orphan. Whenever a large group of people begins to follow after evil kings, the ones who did evil in the sight of the Lord, right? Whenever their allegiance begins to move towards an evil king, the Bible has this way of saying, but there was a group that did not bow their knee to the evil king. There was a group, as all this corruption is going on, there was always a group who kept their heart faithful, who kept looking to God. Now, here's a challenge with the remnant. The remnant is rarely vocal or visible. The remnant, rarely vocal or visible. That's one of the strategies, that's one of the complications for being in the remnant. Back to common knowledge, like, I'm not real sure if you're in the remnant. I'm not real sure if you're following the king or if you're still following God. I don't know, because the remnant isn't loud. The cruelty is loud. The disobedience is loud. The idolatry is loud. The remnant's not loud. We studied Elijah, or maybe you've read that story before in 1 Kings. And there was that moment that Elijah got really depressed, and he says to God, I'm the only one left. Like, I'm the only faithful one left. And God says, I got 7,000 people who haven't bowed the knee. But Elijah didn't know that. The remnant often feels lonely. And this is where Habakkuk is. Habakkuk knows the kings that the prophet served under, multiple kings. These kings are evil. We do not want to bow down to this king. But God, this group right here, we're discouraged. We're discouraged because so many in our country have bowed down to corruption. So he's speaking on behalf of the remnant. Here's what he says. How long, Lord? Must I call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore the law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous so that justice is perverted. Here we are, God. We're the ones trying to do what's right. We're not loud. We're not real visible. It's just a small group of us, but we are not bowing down to an evil king. God, why aren't you helping us? Why don't you do something, God? Here's the thing I see in Habakkuk. When we meet this prophet, like right out the gate, soon as he opens his mouth, we meet a relatable Habakkuk. We meet a relatable Habakkuk. Or maybe you don't think you can relate to an Old Testament prophet. But when you start hearing what Habakkuk has to say, some of us, maybe all of us are going to go, yeah, that's how I feel. I get that. Different circumstances, your life, whatever's happening in your life. I get asking those questions. I get being frustrated because I don't know what God's doing. I get misunderstanding and wanting God to explain it to me. He's relatable. And here's two reasons why I think he's relatable. He asks the questions we often ask. He just puts it out there. You've asked these questions, maybe in the quiet. Maybe you've never verbalized them. But you've probably asked these questions, two big questions. As a matter of fact, I think these are the two biggest questions we ever ask about God. First question, how long? God, how long? In Habakkuk's circumstances, how long must I call out for help? How long must I cry out to you? Inference, this is not the first time he's prayed. This is not the first time he's asked this question. And Habakkuk is done. He is exhausted. God, I have prayed, and I have prayed, and I have prayed, and I see nothing. How long? If you've never asked the how long question, good for you. Like, I need to eat whatever you're eating. I need to work out however you're working out. I need to do whatever you do. But I'm telling you, at some point in your life, you're going to ask that. God, how long are things going to stay like this for me? How long am I going to struggle, God? How long am I going to be alone? How long am I going to hurt? How long will grief last? We all ask a series of how long questions our whole life. That's why I'm telling you, you're going to like this guy because he asked the question you ask. How long? How long is it going to hurt? And the how long question, it's different for each of us. We're all asking different how long questions, but you'll ask it someday. How long? How long do I have to suffer? How long does this have to last? Then he asks the other $1 million question, why? How long and why? Two biggest questions I think you and I ever ask in our life. How long is this going to go on? And God, why? Why did this happen? Why does this keep happening? And we don't get an answer today, all right? We don't get an answer. But I hope it's a little bit comforting that the prophet asked the same questions you ask, and God heard him. The prophet, the man of God, asked the exact questions you ask. How long, God? Why? That's one of the reasons he's relatable. He asks the questions that we ask. Second reason, I think, is because Habakkuk is bothered by the same problems that bother us. Now, maybe not individually, but kind of globally. Look at the things that he complains about. Violence. God, there's violence and there's no one to rescue. The oppressor has all of the strength, has all of the power. That echoes the words of other prophets in the Old Testament. The oppressor has all of the power, and they're committing violence, and there is no one to protect the innocent. There's cruelty. And instead of somebody stepping in, this violence just gets more and more and more. He complains about injustice. Like right is wrong and wrong is right, and nobody's ever held accountable. The powerful are never held accountable for the violence that they're acting, God. And you look at the world sometimes. You look at the world globally, and you think, man, there's so much violence. Why isn't anybody doing anything? God, why aren't you doing anything? He's bothered by the same things we're bothered by. The flip side of injustice is there's wrongdoing in the sense of wrongful suffering. The innocent are suffering. The powerful are continuing to commit violence, and there is no justice against them. They're never held accountable. And the ones who are suffering at the hands of that, no one's speaking up for them. There's wrongful suffering everywhere. No one's protecting the innocent. No one's protecting the vulnerable. There's destruction, not just physical destruction. Systems are being destroyed. Society is being destroyed. Structure is being destroyed. Culture is being destroyed. There's political upheaval. Again, the kings did evil in the sight of the Lord. So there's this political corruption, this political upheaval in his day. There's strife and conflict. In other words, everybody's at each other. Everybody's arguing. Everywhere you look, somebody's getting into it. Somebody's taken a side and they're mad at the other side. And then even if you go to the courts, he says, there's no justice there. He uses phrases like the law is paralyzed. Justice never prevails. He says, look, even if I get to a court, I can't be sure they're going to do the right thing. I can't be sure that they haven't been corrupted by the king, that power and money hasn't infiltrated the legal system. We can't even go to the courthouse and feel like we're going to be treated fairly. And Habakkuk is just pouring this out again, again, and again. And I know on the one hand, we could make application to a lot of different directions, right? We could look at our world and we could say, yeah, I see that there, and I see that there, and I see that in that government, and I see that in that country, and I see that over here. It's important to remember the people that Habakkuk are complaining about are his people. The call is coming from inside the house, if you're old enough to get that reference. The problem is not Babylon. He's not complaining about Babylon. He's not complaining about some other wicked country. He's saying, God, our people, your people, God, have aligned themselves with cruelty and with merciless power and with empire. Your people are siding with kings who have done evil in the sight of the Lord. Not somebody else. Us, God. Us. Will you fix us? We are the problem. We're the remnant trying to hang on, but so many of your people have aligned their lives with the empire that's ruling over us right now. Will you do something? And notice, Habakkuk's anger is directed at God. He's ticked off at God. He's prayed this enough, and he doesn't feel like God has responded. He's mad at God. And maybe you saw it as we went through. He says things like, I call for help. You do not listen, God. This is your fault. I cry out to you. You do not save. You make me look at injustice. How about that? God, I'm seeing all of this, and it's your fault. You make me look at all of this horrible stuff that's going on. You could do something. Why don't you tolerate wrongdoing? All right, that's bold. Like if you're good with God right now, like if your relationship's good, you're thinking like, lightning strike. I'm staying away from this guy. Here's something else that Habakkuk reminds us. God can handle the full weight of your emotions, whatever they are. We're going to get to this point sometimes. We're going to get to this point. And God could handle the prophet who really did love him, who really did follow him. God could handle the prophet pouring out his emotion, pouring out his anger, saying, God, I'm to the point that I'm blaming you for this. Now, that is not the same as expecting God to change his plans because I got mad. All right, those aren't the same. God can take our anger. God can take the full weight of our emotions. I don't get angry enough at God that he decides to change his mind. Let's not get confused. Like part of the theme of Habakkuk is going to be God's sovereignty. That God has a plan and God is at work and you don't see it and I don't always see it. But God is in control and God is moving. We can bring our full emotion to God because God knows sometimes we just got to get it out. We just got to get it out. When you do that, remember his character. In the midst of the weight and the frustration and the anger and the despair, come back around to who God is. Everything Habakkuk accused God of is wrong. God, you do not listen. No, he's a listening God. He's heard every word. God, you do not save. No, he's already said, my arm's not too short to save. I can say, God, you tolerate wrongdoing. No, not forever. Not forever. God, you do nothing about injustice. No, injustice bothers God way more than it bothers us. Habakkuk is so angry that he's completely mischaracterized God. And sometimes we get to that point. Sometimes our emotions get us to a point where we just go after God and we need to take a deep breath after doing that and realize, okay, like nothing I just said about or to God is true. Another observation. Be open to how God will change you in these moments. You can bring all of the weight of your emotion and all of your anger and all of your despair, and you can have your moment with God. And you can let him have it if you need to let him have it. Just know God's not going to leave you there. God's not going to leave you there. He's going to let you start there. Anybody? This is a bad example. I just thought of it. This is a bad example. But if you got kids and they're throwing a temper tantrum, like sometimes you just got to, I'll wait. Just get it out. As long as you don't hurt yourself. Just scream it out, like do your thing. In some ways, God, whose heart is compassionate, says, I know you need to say this. So say it so that we can start going in a different direction. So we can start moving again. God does not leave us where he finds us. He doesn't leave us in our anger, in our disillusionment. When we get to Habakkuk chapter 3, there will be a very different prophet waiting for us there. Spoiler alert. There'll be a very different prophet. But he's going to go through some anger. He's going to go through some confusion. He's going to push back against God's response. And then God's going to use all of that to change his heart, to grow his heart, to turn him into who God wants him to be. But not only does God not leave us where he finds us, God will not leave the world where he finds the world. God is at work renewing and redeeming all things. And I know we look at the world and we look at our group and we say sometimes, like, this is not the way it's supposed to be. God is not done. God will not leave the world as it currently is. He is renewing and remaking and redeeming and bringing grace. Now, ultimately, God's greatest answer, I'll do this quickly. God's greatest response to all of the brokenness of the world was to send his son. Habakkuk doesn't know that yet. Right? He knows a Messiah is coming. He doesn't know what we know. We share some common knowledge about God's plan that Habakkuk didn't have. That ultimately, the one that was going to break through all of this was going to be a man named Jesus. As a matter of fact, the list that Habakkuk made, Jesus was going to be the opposite of that whole list. Instead of violence, Jesus was going to come and teach us to turn the other cheek. He was going to teach us to absorb violence because Jesus did that to his death. He absorbed the violence of Rome and even of religious leaders in himself without responding. Instead of injustice, Jesus would be the righteous judge. Instead of enduring wrongdoing, Jesus would side with the suffering. He would side with the weak. He would side with the vulnerable. Instead of destruction, Jesus came to make all things new. Instead of conflict, Jesus came to be the Prince of Peace. An answer is coming. God is not done. And just like he was not done in Habakkuk, he is not done in your life. However many why questions you have, how long questions, they are not insignificant, and God hears them. God hears them. He has responded in his Son, and he will continue to respond to you. It's a burden, it's a weight. But it's a weight we very much live in as we look at a world and we see places that aren't as they are supposed to be. 90s kids, 90s youth group kids, we gave you those bracelets, right? And what did they say? What would Jesus do? Gave you t-shirts, took you to youth camp. What would Jesus do? We read Habakkuk from our perspective, from our common knowledge, through the lens of, yes, the world looks like this. Jesus is going to come to be this. So as I now live in a broken world, I got to ask myself, what would Jesus do here? In the violence that we see, the conflict that we see, the brokenness that we see in our world, in 2026, the time that we live. The question is, okay, how would Jesus respond to that, and how do I do that? Why don't I just do that? If Jesus was the ultimate answer to everything Habakkuk was saying, he's the ultimate answer right now. How do we just do that? Would you pray? Maybe you come today with questions. Maybe why and how long is on your lips too. And I just want to pray for you. And I want to say to you, we're going to sing and we're going to have prayer leaders down front. If you want somebody to pray for what you're going through, if you just want somebody to pray over you, they're going to be at the front. if you are broken by things that you see, if you are hurt, if Habakkuk's prayer sounds like your prayer and you want somebody to pray for you, we're going to have people at the front. They'd love to pray for you during this song and after the service. God, I pray over us today. Habakkuk is a long time in the rearview mirror, and yet so much of his brokenness sounds like us, because we ask why, and we ask how long, and we look at the world. We even look at other believers, and we think, God, I don't think this is the way of Jesus. Help us to be like Jesus in those moments, to say what he would say, to act as he would act, to be faithful to the calling of our lives, to represent your kingdom on this earth. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's stand and worship together. If you